Hi, Karen. This is Shannon.
Hi, Shannon.
Hey, I just testing the microphone to make sure you can hear me.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you fine. I'm going to turn the microphone off so we will not be able to hear you talking. Or
Okay.
you won't be able to hear us.
O- Okay,
Okay?
I'm going to. Okay.
This is my pleasure to introduce our new board member, the Honorable Pat Gerard, to the Juvenile Welfare Board. It gives me great pleasure to welcome our newest JWB board member, Commissioner Pat Gerard, who will serve as an ex officio capability on our board. Commissioner Pat Gerard is a longstanding public servant. She has been elected to the Pinellas County Board of County Commissioners in 2014 and previously served on the Largo Commission, City Commission from 2000 to 2014, the last 8 years as mayor of the city. During Commissioner Gerard's tenure with Largo, the city partnered with the Central Pinellas Chamber of Commerce to streamline the permitting application process, which allows small businesses to grow and create new jobs during the economic turndown. In addition, the city built a library that was recognized as the best in the state, a new community center with a platinum LEED certificate, and a recreation center that benefits the citizens of all ages. Commissioner Gerard has dedicated her career to human services, working with victims of assault, domestic violence, and homelessness. She began her career more than 40 years ago working in a community-based rehabilitation program where she served as the chronically mentally ill. She has served as a victim advocate for the Largo Police Department in 1984 to 1986, as a director of religious community services, spouse abuse shelter in 1986 to 1992, and as chief operating officer and chief grants officer with Family Resources from 1992 to 2019. In her official capacity as the Pinellas County Commissioner, and in addition to her services on our board, Commissioner Gerard serves on the Affordable Housing Committee, County Attorney Oversight Committee, Health and Human Services Leadership Board, the Pinellas County License Bureau and Licensing Board, Public Safety Coordinating Council, and Chair of the Pinellas County Suncoast Transit Authority. Please join me in welcoming Commissioner Gerard and express our gratitude for her longstanding services to our community. Would you like to say anything? No. Okay.
No, I think you've said it all.
Okay.
I didn't know you were going to read that whole thing.
I'm just tired of thinking about it.
Actually, I'm delighted to be here.
Great. Okay, let's move on to the consent items. After I'm sure everyone's read the board minutes from December 9th, 2021, do I have a motion to approve?
Move to approve the consent items.
Move
I
to
have a
second.
motion. I have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Accepting of the financial report from November 2021. Do I have a motion to approve?
Oh, Mr. Chairman, my motion was to approve the consent items as a block.
As a block?
Yes.
Is that the same?
And my second was as a block.
Okay, so let's then, having revised that, let me take that one more time. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Okay, great. Let's move on to the action items. Okay, action item A, approve the FY 2022 CEO goals. I think we've discussed these over a lengthy period of time. The one thing that we did, we made some adjustments, as we all discussed before, made adjustments to the way to the contract that we have with Beth, and we added to that what I will call stretch goals. We in the past have always talked about how do we ensure that we're meeting the goals, and how do we get to the next level? How can we measure success moving forward? We worked with Beth to create these goals. They are in front of you. I think you've had an opportunity to read them before. So are there any questions or concerns or any additional modifications from any of the board members? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve?
So move.
I have a second. Have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. They're approved. Let's move on to item B. Approve non-operating and capital project requests for applications or RFA Funding Recommendations. Laura Krug.
Thank you. Good morning.
As mentioned, we're here to approve the recommendations from the Executive Committee for the non-operating and capital projects application. So that RFA was released back in September of 2020. Our initiative had a budgeted amount of $1.75 million this year. And just to remind you, a year ago, that budgeted amount was 1.25, but you went ahead and approved an amount of 1.487 because you took into consideration all the projects that had scored the 65 minimum score ranking. But this year, we had 31 applications. We had 41 projects. So total applications were $2.74 million. Last year, we also had 2 projects that the agencies could apply for. The minimum amount per project is $10,000. The maximum amount was increased this year from $125,000 max last year to $150,000 max this year. We were hoping to get a lot of applications that could help generate some infrastructure, capital, technology, and these type of items. So the recommendations have been presented to the executive team. And all the applications that had scored 65 or over were reviewed, and each one was ranked accordingly. The $1.75 million, however, was not enough to cover all of those that had reached that threshold. So the cutoff came at a 76 point grade, so to speak, and we were able to award, what we're recommending is that we have a total of 25 projects. 23 of those were fully funded based on what they had applied for. 2 of them were not. One of them, they had some items in there that were rejected due to the nature of the computers and the ownership. And the last one was the cutoff for our 1.75. The Girl Scouts was shorted, if you would, or they were not able to get $65 of their total amount, and they have responded that they were willing to pony that amount up to be able to cover it. So the recommendation here is to approve the $1.75 million for a total of 25 projects, and I'll turn it back to the chair for any questions.
Motion to approve?
Second. Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passed. Okay, let's move on to item C, appointment of board members to financial committee effectively immediately. I'm sorry. I was so loud I figured that everybody could hear me anyway. The board will need to appoint a new voting member to serve on the financial committee to replace the seat previously held by Commissioner Karen Seal. At this time, I am asking for any volunteers who are willing to serve on the financial committee.
I'll volunteer.
I have a volunteer, Judge Moore. You voiced, Judge Moore volunteered. We will voice their nomination to serve the financial committee. If agreed, I will call for the nomination of Judge Moore to serve on the financial committee.
I nominate Judge Moore to serve on the Finance Committee.
I have a motion.
Second.
I have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Judge Moore, thank you for joining and your willingness to join the committee. Great, let's move on then to approve, item D, to approve the community council appointments. Joanne Rich, community planner, can you please provide us with that information?
Yes, good morning. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our 2 newest applicants to serve on our community councils, Ms. Pamela Yerkes and Christine Britt. Pamela, who's applied to be in the North County Community Council member, she's originally from Tarrytown, New York, but she has lived in Oldsmar, Florida since 1999. She's the proud mother of a 20-year-old daughter, and who is the reason she got into community service. She has a long-standing career in the technology industry as a project manager, and she's run some national and international projects for financial, government, and hospitality industries. Ms. Yerkes is an active volunteer with Oldsmar Cares, and she's been performing various tasks, including revamping the closing closet and collecting feedback to ensure clients have had a positive experience. You may know her as the one who leads their largest fundraiser. And they are an all-volunteer organization, so the fundraising is extremely important. She's been the co-chair of that the last 2 years. And during this time, Ms. Yerkes also started her own wedding and event planning business. She's become a certified wedding planner, and she holds other certifications and timelines as well, in timelines and design as well. She's received an award for the fundraising gala planning a few years ago, and currently she leads the effort with local elementary schools for the Weekend Foods for Kids program in Oldsmar Cares. She's already attended several meetings with the North County Community Council, and I must say all of them are eager for her to become a full member. So thank you for your consideration. The second applicant is Ms. Christine Britt, who is a Pacific Islander with a passion to reach out and help her community. She has a better half, Alex, a daughter, Alexandra, and son, Kejui. I'm sorry if I didn't pronounce that correct, Christine. Ms. Britt started working for the city of Pinellas Park, and she even was nominated for Employee of the Year. She has been transferred to the Public Works Department and is currently an administrative assistant there. Ms. Britt has been a great asset for the city of Pinellas Park and will be a great asset for the JWB Mid-County Community Council as well. Upon approval, this would bring our total of community council members to 42, 12 in the North County, 17 in Mid-County, and 13 in South County. Ms. Britt would serve on the Mid-County. So thank you for your consideration, and I must say that both of these women are present this morning, should you have any questions or like to hear from them.
Please, or stand. Thank you so much. Would either of you like to say anything? No? Okay, then with that, do I have a motion to approve?
I move to appoint Ms. Yerkes and Ms. Britt to the North and Mid-County Councils respectively.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
I second that.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Having no opposement, thank you both for welcome. Okay, and then let's move on to item E. Approve termination of the sublease to 211 Tampa Bay Cares. Laura Peel.
Yes, good morning. I'm Laura Peel, Director of Information Technology, but I also oversee the building here at JWB. So the board meeting, or the board memo that I'm presenting today is to approve the termination of the sublease with 211 Tampa Bay Cares and JWB. I'm going to give you just a couple of seconds here of some history. As outlined in the memo, JWB leased this building in 2007 from St. Petersburg College. We have a 99-year lease, which we pay $1 for, but that is not the only thing we pay. We have about $181,000 of expenses that are included in the lease. That includes security, maintenance, and janitorial services for this building. So in May of 2012, we entered into a sublease agreement with 211 to lease out approximately 3,000 square feet of office space in the back of the building here. They use it for their call center and administrative offices. Their payments to JWB of approximately $21,000 per year are also based on operating expenses. They pay us their portion based on the square foot that they are occupying. Way back in 2012, things were a little bit different than they were now. We had much smaller staff and didn't need the extra room. However, since that time, our staff began to grow, and we literally started using hallways, closets, and conference rooms to remodel them into offices to accommodate the growing number of staff that we were bringing on board. Today, we're at 72 positions and don't have the capacity right now to create workspaces for all of our employees and our BTS staff that is housed here at JWB. In other words, you know we're teleworking, but if we were all come back in the office today, there's literally not enough space for every employee that we have. In addition, several years ago, 211 also began to grow out of room. They procured a second location and moved their administrative staff here. So what's remaining is the call center. And as of very recently, they indicated to our staff that they actually may begin to look for alternative space with the idea of having their staff back together as well. The way the 10-year lease is written is that at the end of the 10th year, JWB can provide a 1-year notice to terminate the lease. The 10-year option is coming up on May 1st of 2022. JWB staff are recommending that the board approve terminating the 2-on-1 sublease and allow us to give the 1-year notice for termination now, which would make the effective termination date being May 1st of 2023. It would essentially provide 2-on-1 an additional 4.5 to 5 months, a total of about 17 months, to secure a new location and relocate. And we really thought, given the current economic conditions and with COVID and everything else, that the extra time would be very beneficial. With this, JWB would continue to pay our normal amount to St. Pete College and continue with our lease. We would also begin to assess how we would use the 3,000 square feet in the back of the room. And we would include renovation dollars in our fiscal year 2023 budget so that we could prepare it for staff. So I think that's it. Does anybody have any questions?
Any questions from the board?
Sounds fair to me. I did have a question for Beth on the remote working. Is it our vision that someday, God willing, COVID in the rearview mirror, that we're going to have full staff, or at least a lot of the staff, back on a full-time basis? Or are we envisioning that there's going to be a significant amount of remote working going on regardless of whether we have a pandemic or not?
Well, it would be my best guess, and I'll put it that way, that we would have significant activity back in the building, but that we would simultaneously also have a fair amount of remote work. But one of the real advantages to getting people back in the building is to have them all back in the building at a given point in time, which we could not do today. So I expect going forward we will have flexibility for employees, but that we would want to have meetings. And on meeting days that employees who came in for that meeting could also work here the rest of the day to provide that, that subtle je ne sais quoi that happens when people can just pop into each other's offices and see each other. And today that's just not possible, not only for the reasons that Laura stated, but frankly, it's my sense that going forward, even once we're, I won't say past COVID, but past this sort of phase of COVID, that everyone is going to be looking at safe air and how close they are to each other for flus and colds and everything else. And as Laura said, we have crammed people into, even the cubicles are very small. Yes. And not to mention the corners in the halls and those sorts of spaces. So I hope that answers your question.
Any other questions, comments? So do I have a motion to approve the process of the 2-on-1?
I'll motion to approve.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. As opposed, same sign. Okay, let's move on to the presentations. Children's Mental Health Initiative, the annual report. Rebecca Albert.
Good morning. I'm Becky Albert, Strategic Manager here at JWB. And today I'll be highlighting the Children's Mental Health Initiative, the work that's been done over the past couple of years. There's also a report in the board packet. It's very detailed, but it depicts the ever-changing landscape of children's mental health in our community, if you will. It also talks about the progress we're making, as well as opportunities for improving. Most of you have seen this slide before. It's the initiative's 5-year timeline at a very high level. From where we started back in the planning phase in 2018 to implementation and integrating behavioral health and support staff within the pediatric setting in 2020 to where we currently are today. And what a unique opportunity we have as we begin to expand and scale this initiative beyond Evra Health. So highlights from year 2. Staff that have been integrated within Evra Health have administered more than 11,000 screenings to over 9,000 children. They're looking for adverse childhood experiences. And why is this important? Well, because screenings help with prevention efforts, but they also lead to early detection and intervention. It also provides an opportunity to talk with parents and caregivers to increase awareness and provide education relevant to a child's sense of security, safety, stability, and well-being. The Children's Mental Health Team also supported more than 2,000 children, but what is important to note here is that when one child is supported, oftentimes the entire family benefits. So when we talk about being supported through care coordination, the level of interaction with the integrated staff varies based on the individual need. Examples of the coordination of care and the support that's being provided include exchanging information such as medical and school records, addressing social determinants of health, following up with social service providers on the referrals, and providing education to parents and caregivers, including medication management. So the amount of time that each staff person spends with the family and on task varies based on need. More than 1,200 children last year had at least one visit with a behavioral health therapist. So I just want to say that again, that more than 1,200 children last year saw a therapist that was integrated into the pediatric practice. So what this initiative is really doing is increasing access and providing real-time services. In addition, a process was created for implementing the pediatric symptom checklist. This is also a screening tool, and why I'm highlighting it today is because if you recall, back in 2020, when we brought the REACH Institute here to Pinellas, the REACH Institute is a group of psychiatrists and other physicians. They trained some of our local pediatricians to be better equipped at identifying and treating low to moderate behavioral health conditions. And then COVID happened. So some of what we had hoped to do was postpone. However, I'm happy to report that both Evra Health and North Pinellas Children's Medical Center have begun rolling out the pediatric symptom checklist. Again, the purpose of bringing the REACH Institute here was to provide pediatricians with education so that we can increase capacity with treating low to moderate behavioral health conditions. So we wanted to survey the pediatricians that participated in our REACH Institute. About half of them responded, and what we learned was that 92% of the pediatricians agreed that the REACH Institute provided them with the knowledge and the skills necessary to identify, diagnose, and prescribe low to moderate mental health conditions. 92% also reported that they are managing more low to moderate mental health conditions without having to refer their patients to psychiatry. We also learned that while pediatricians who completed the fellowship are more comfortable with identifying and diagnosing basic conditions such as anxiety and depression, 83% reported that they would benefit from more education and training for ongoing treatment and management, specifically referencing the medication management, given that the effectiveness of medications may lessen over time. So this is the demographics of the pediatric population. It really speaks for itself, but the gist here is that these demographics are the children that have been touched by at least one screening a screening related to this initiative. You'll notice that slightly more females were served than males, but the majority of the children fell within 2 of the 3 age range categories, the 4 to 11-year-olds and the 12 to 18. Yet a little more than half, or 53% of the children, were 11 years and younger. So our Centralized Oversight Committee, which I tend to refer to as the watchdog, we continue meeting, and we're really offering guidance into unique cases that the pediatricians are bringing forward. It's a multidisciplinary committee made up of doctors, therapists, other professionals, social service providers. They each bring a unique perspective and experience to aid in the process. So common diagnoses that we're hearing from the pediatricians at EverHealth include attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder, autism spectrum disorder, developmental and behavioral concerns such as disruptive behaviors, the inability to follow directions, and toileting difficulties, just to name a few. We're also hearing from the pediatrician at North Pinellas Children's Medical Center, whose case presentations tend to include children with symptoms of anxiety and depression. What we're seeing locally aligns with the national statistics in that 1 in 5 children between the ages of 3 and 17 have a reported mental, emotional, developmental, or behavioral health disorder. We've seen an upward trend in referrals to coordination with the schools, NAMI Pinellas, kinship, programming that offers mentoring and tutoring, as well as to specialty providers such as a developmental pediatrician. The Centralized Oversight Committee continues to inform refinement of existing workflows, recommending improvements to the standardization of documentation practices, and it contributes to the development of the data dashboards that are really built to analyze, track, and drive decision-making from a population health perspective. The data dashboards also offer transparency into the workload of each staff person, as well as productivity rates. So what you're seeing here is a care map that was created by the nurse case managers who also participate in the Centralized Oversight Committee that I just mentioned. They're constantly looking for ways to improve and best meet the needs of the children and families that they work with. And this particular map is a map that is associated with children who have been diagnosed with ADHD. So each treatment map isn't necessarily the same because treatment varies by child. However, the staff have found this type of visual to be extremely helpful to the parents and caregivers because it helps them to understand what all may be involved with their child's treatment once they've been diagnosed. For some families, it may involve all of these stops along the way. For others, it may only involve some. So examples include frequency of medical visits, medication monitoring and compliance, meetings with school staff relevant to supports or interventions that may be beneficial to the child when they're in school, parent support groups, and so forth. So another way of thinking about this is, let's say you've been diagnosed with high blood pressure, and now you're required to take a daily medication. But for some, in addition to the medication, you may also need to make a change to your diet. You may need to increase the frequency of exercise. Oh, and somewhere down the road, you'll probably be asked to get some blood work done and have an ECG or an electrocardiogram. Similar experiences occur when we're treating mental and behavioral health conditions. There's no such thing as a magic pill. Yet you'd be surprised how many parents and caregivers believe that once their child gets the medication, everything's going to be fixed. So these care maps really help to manage the expectations of parents and caregivers alike. So the Adverse Childhood Experiences Questionnaire is what we primarily use as a screening tool to date. Again, the screenings are very important for early detection and intervention. but also because they help to develop meaningful conversations, which conversations lead to the development of relationships. So while the screening rate in year 2 decreased when compared to year 1, what's important to notice is the number of screenings that were administered actually increased. How's that possible? Well, because the pediatric population at EverHealth grew substantially from year 1 to year 2. They served more than 4,500 new pediatric patients in year 2. So keep in mind that all of this is happening in the midst of COVID. So not only was the practice responding to the pandemic, they literally had just really begun implementing and integrating and getting this initiative off the ground. And I don't know which direction you came into the office here today, but if you notice the long line of cars down the road, because numbers are back up again, so they're testing. So I just, really want to say kudos to EverHealth for administering the amount of screenings that they're doing and continuing to push and meet the needs of our community in more ways than one. Okay, so what you're seeing on the left is a graph for average days it takes to get an appointment with a therapist. The national quality metric for accessing behavioral health services, in other words, getting access to a therapist, is 10 days. And so we haven't quite reached that 10-day mark, but we're moving in the right direction. So you can see that we moved down from 12 days in year 1 to 11 days in year 2. But this improvement happened even with the significant uptick in the number of appointments and patients needing to see a therapist. Now it takes us to the chart on the right, which is the occurred appointment rate for behavioral health. And so while the occurred appointment rate remained the same from year 2 when looking back to year 1, what's meaningful about this is that there was a significant increase in the number of appointments not only scheduled, but in the number of appointments that actually occurred. And when appointments occur, when people are going to their appointments, that really is an indicator of engagement. And in fact, there was such a significant increase that it was a 206% increase in year 2 compared to year 1. So behavioral health visits and encounters, well, there were more than 3,000 behavioral health visits in year 2. When compared to year 1, it was a 104% increase. Now, just keep in mind that a patient doesn't always need to have an appointment, which is why the numbers look slightly different in the charts from the previous slide that you saw. But really, we're working to make sure that every interaction or encounter is documented. And it's important to us because we need to continue to monitor the caseload of the therapist since they're seeing an increase in the number of children who need to see a therapist. So we need to keep an eye on that because we don't want them to get so overburdened, which, later down the line, we may need to come back and look to add additional therapists. Of all of the behavioral health visits that occurred in year 2, approximately 31% occurred by telehealth. So that too may have contributed to the increase. When they did telehealth, it was either by video or telephonically. And patients who actually saw a therapist, on average, had 3 visits over the past 12 months. The chart on the right demonstrates same-day access. So in year 1, this was somewhat of a challenge, but again, we weren't fully staffed with therapists. So there were 76 same-day visits with behavioral health therapists, compared to year 2, which there were 715 same-day visits consisting of 550 patients, meaning that some patients in year 2 had more than 1 same-day visits with a therapist. So So in addition to the integrated staff at EverHealth, we're continuing to get out into the community, providing trainings. We're increasing awareness and education about adverse childhood experiences. We've reached more than 800 professionals across 18 organizations, with 98% of professionals who participated saying that they increased knowledge post-training. We also participated in the 4th Annual Healing While Black Summit, which required us to tailor the current training so that we could have a more focused approach for individuals participating to better understand the impact that trauma has with children of color. We also provided applicable strategies for increasing resilience within communities of color, which included and offered a breakout session that several attended. Excuse me. So the stress buster wheels on the left, they're magnets. And those are also being distributed in the community as well as at EverHealth. At EverHealth, the wellness coaches are using those as a conversation starter. Really, it's an opportunity to help create a caring environment. It also leads to the development of relationships, which we all know is the foundation to a healthier and happier community. So an unexpected benefit of the Children's Mental Health Initiative excuse me, is the VPK initiative. So it's an initiative within an initiative, if you will. The CMHI staff really took it upon themselves to partner with the Early Learning Coalition of Pinellas and said, hey, we want to help. We know that we need more children enrolled in VPK. And what they found was that they were actually documenting whether a child who falls within the age range that meets the criteria for VPK was being tracked in the medical record, but it really wasn't, there wasn't an effective way to export the data from a population level. So what EverHealth did is they made some improvements, and now they're able to export the data so they can really drill down into individuals who have yet to be enrolled in a VPK program. So the wellness coaches started their outreach efforts and contacted families, and last year they successfully assisted with the enrollment of 50 families into VPK. Some of the obstacles that they learned from the families were that they didn't even know about the VPK. Others included documentation requirements that are necessary when completing the application. So this will continue over time, but I think that this is something great since we all know that we want to get more children enrolled in early learning. And finally, I just want to mention the Healthy Weight program. This is important for addressing the number of children who are falling outside of what is considered a healthy weight. They are either overweight or obese. And a recent study suggested that 56% of America's children today, 56% of America's children today are overweight or obese, compared to 7% who were overweight or obese back in the 70s. So this really is a critical area to focus in on as well. Technology. Well, we are making advancements, not as quickly as what I would like, but these are the organizations that continue to regularly work together, who are sharing information and really strategizing on how to best close the gaps. We're continuing to add or increase the number of partners that are sharing information, but we have a lot of work to do. I guess the good news about this is that we're not alone. In fact, there's been a lot of research, a lot of articles coming out recently talking about the technology being one of the biggest challenges when working toward a patient-centered model. So organizations that deliver complex services, well, complex services to individuals because we are complex, really creates challenges because they're collecting different data points for various funding sources. it presents challenges. I will say that we've recently been, really working closely with the county, and so we're moving in the same direction as it relates to some of the key performance indicators as well as the data fields so that it's consistent across the board. Solutions that were discussed in the recent articles really do align with the work that we've been doing in our technology committee, but there's really a culture shift that needs to occur with a lot of the providers. And so again, we have a lot of work to do. And finally, the recommendations for ongoing quality improvement. So the first two really speak to the technology piece. We want to continue to increase the number of organizations that are securely exchanging information. We also want to ensure that that information is not only heading in one direction, but it's multi-directional. We do want to transform the structure of the Centralized Oversight Committee because now as things are becoming more automated, we don't want to bring people together just for the sake of bringing them together. We want to utilize their skill set at the highest level. And so we're looking to make some changes there. And lastly, we really want to continue to provide educational opportunities, more opportunities for the pediatric providers so that we can continue to increase access in our communities for pediatricians to, again, identify, diagnose, and treat low to moderate mental health conditions.
Excellent report. Thank you so much. Are there any comments from the board or questions? Yes, Molly?
I have a question. When you're talking about appointments and visit with therapists, is that inclusive of virtual communication with them or is that all in person?
No, so when we talk about appointments, it does include virtual, yes. And 31% of all appointments that occurred last year were done telehealth. So either they were doing it on video or telephonically.
And does the funding for that telehealth changing affect what you project to be happening, or do you know of any impact on that?
I can't really speak to that right now, but I can look into it and circle back with you.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments or questions?
Mr. McCurrick?
Yes.
I have a question. First of all, this is a wonderful project. The one statistic which caught my attention was the fact that slightly more girls were served in this project as opposed. The gender distribution doesn't reflect what's in the risk literature, which is that boys are much more likely to have ADHD. They're much more likely to be suspended from school for problem behaviors. And so I was just curious on, has there been any discussion? I expected boys to be significantly overrepresented in your sample, and they weren't. So has there been any discussion of that, or maybe any special outreach that might be needed for boys?
So let me just clarify. The demographic slide that you saw was really the patient population at the high level. It's the little more than 9,000 children. So we had 11,000 screenings administered, but we're showing the population being served or touched by this initiative at this time. So even within Evra Health, there's an opportunity to continue to reach more children because, there's still that 40%, right, that haven't been screened. We are looking into our population of focus, the 4 to 11. We don't have enough information at this time to say what it is or isn't, but that is something that we're looking at and extracting from the larger data set.
Excellent. Once again, I think that this was an excellent report, and over the short period of time in which this program has been created, I can see that there's been a lot of heavy involvement by the community, both from communities as well as physicians. And I could even see, and I know this might sound a little odd, but as I reviewed and saw the the autism care map, and the other maps. I'm sorry, but it immediately made me think of the last 30 years of reading Goldbug, and looking, as immediately as I saw it, I started looking for the Goldbug. I'm sorry, that would be. But my grandkids, my older son and the like, but well done, easy to follow. I think there's a great deal of information that you have. There's a great deal of information that will continue to come. And I just commend the team for all the work that they've done, and please keep up the good work.
So over time, have you added or lost any community partners? Added, or, I'm just curious, is, one of my observations is how exciting the integration of the community resources and different organizations, different goals and missions of those organizations. But I was curious if you're picking up new organizations, or if some have maybe fell off.
So I'll say, yes, we are picking up new organizations. One in particular, you've heard me mention before, but the North Pinellas Children's Medical Center, they're located in North County, Palm Harbor area. They have mostly 10 physicians that work out of that location. And I've been working with them weekly, going into the office, actually. They finally they're in the process of hiring staff. So they'll be bringing staff in this month, and I suspect February, March. But I believe that once the staff are integrated and this takes off within their practice, we're really going to need to be prepared to discuss how we may grow the initiative larger there. I will say also youth service staff from the libraries at several locations. So Eastlake, Seminole, Palm Harbor, Dunedin, Pinellas Park, Largo. Recently, the group of the youth service staff from the libraries have been participating. So yes, we're continuing to add new partners, but they may serve different roles, if that makes sense. You're welcome.
Once again, thank you so much for the presentation. Let's move then on to workforce stabilization. Karen, are you with us?
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good morning, Karen Bogus. I'm the Chief Program Officer. I will be presenting this morning on workforce stabilization, such a critical issue. Prior to COVID-19, our early learning centers and our out-of-school time programs had retention and recruitment challenges with staff, and it has only magnified over the past 2 years. And we are certainly at a critical point. Both of these types of programs operate 5 days a week. They help support families to continue working or going to school, provide safe environments, ongoing learning for our children and our youth. And staffing shortages and turnovers are impacting how services are being delivered. As you see in the memo, 6 of our early learning centers have 11 classrooms closed and 40 staff vacancies. Our out-of-school time programs, I participated on a call yesterday with all of them, and what we're hearing is wait lists. They can't even start taking children off their wait lists because of staffing shortages. So we internally at JWB worked on a process and an application to hopefully address this workforce stabilization issue. And we put together a few categories, as you can see, that increased opportunity for funding for salary and fringe, additional staff positions, professional development, administrative costs, and operating costs that may specifically be related to the additional positions. And we're going to be asking for the programs to be submitting to us retention and recruitment plans because we want them to retain current qualified staff, and then even look at possibly, recruiting staff that may be left because of some of the challenges, whether it be salary or otherwise. So these programs, we will be tomorrow sending out the process to 21 programs, which is in the attachment. We will be an internal process to review all of the applications and bring that to executive leadership for approval. This will be considered in the fiscal year 23 budget process. Our finance staff are estimating that this may be $2.1 million. Our overall investment in these 21 programs is about 15 million, and the 2.1 is about 13.5% of that total investment. I now open up for questions.
Do I have any questions from the board? Seeing none, thank you so much for the presentation.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on to item 6, which is our discussion items. 211 Tampa Bay Cares Inc. contract. Beth and Linda, could you lead us in this discussion?
Sure. 211 Tampa Bay Cares Chair notified JWB leadership yesterday of their intent to terminate their JWB contract effective March 31st, 2022, or on a mutually agreed upon date. This is on the heels of a robust discussion that took place at our December board meeting about 211's ongoing corrective action plan that was issued in November 2020, and the board's desire to have a follow-up discussion at this meeting. Within that letter, 211's board chair thanked JWB for its funding over the past 9 years and committed to working with JWB on a smooth transition. And we wholly expect that they will do all of that. You can find a copy of the full correspondence in your board packet. Because we just received it yesterday, it was posted. It was just posted to the web yesterday.
Yeah, and if I can just make one comment, I did receive a call prior to the letter coming to JWB from Stephen Hoskes, the board chair. We spoke for a short period of time. He explained the position of the meeting that was recently had and the decision that was made, and then he followed up with this letter. So I appreciate the communications.
Mm-hmm.
So just a question, this would cover their FSI referral services, does it? I know we also fund another portion of their budget. Not all of the money that we provide to 211 is related to the FSI referral, is that right? And then does that impact that, or where are we left in terms of, are we still funding them at all, or are we not funding them at all as a result of this?
We have a single contract with 211, and the cap included the entire contract. And it's my understanding that I confirmed with Mickey Thompson this morning that the termination of the contract was the contract in whole. And they can speak for themselves, and I'm sure will, but they will, as all agencies do, try to find funds to do everything they're trying to bite off and chew from other sources, but I'll leave that for them to speak to. Our focus will be a smooth transition, and that will be our key focus in this time, and we have every reason to think that 211 will be extremely helpful in that process. So along with ultimately offering FSI families and community partners, we hope an improved and more efficient and effective experience. After the Juvenile Welfare Board's discussion at their December meeting relative to its concerns about 211, JWB leadership began thinking about all the scenarios that might occur at this meeting or action that this board might take in particular regarding FSI front door capacity. And so one scenario that we're beginning to explore would be to transition that FSI front door component to PIMS. They are one of our core FSI partners. They were part of establishing the very initial FSI criteria, so they're very well versed in it, and are currently contracted with JWB to provide family navigation services. Now, we've had one day to talk about this, but so I met with their CEO yesterday, and they are willing to move forward to discuss what this would mean and what this would look like in terms of both technology and people. So that would call for an amendment of the PIMS agreement through the end of fiscal year '22, and we are looking for approval for me to go ahead and do that within the total budgeted funds that JWB had already budgeted for the FSI component. So we would come back in February with additional details, but we do, out of courtesy to 211, we do want to move as quickly as we can to help make that transition.
Well, I guess, excuse me. I know that JWB has provided funding to 211 helpline, whatever it was before that, for at least 30 years. And obviously, not all that time was about FSI. And so I would encourage staff to look at what kind of, unless they don't want JWB money at all, what kind of support could we provide for that basic INR service, because it's very important to this community. And if it goes away, we have a huge problem. And it's not so easy to just pick up. Not everybody can do, how many agencies do we have? I forget. It's a lot. Thousands of agencies and services. And yes, we've been unsatisfied as a board with their performance on FSI, but underlying all that is the basic INR service, and I think we should continue to support that for our families.
Yeah, just to be clear, the corrective action plan was for the whole breadth of services, but you still might.
And I may just, I'll try to bite my tongue a little bit, but, and I suspect, I don't know, some of you know that I ran 211 almost 20 years ago. And my very first meeting at 211, or at Helpline, was a confrontation with Jim Mills and Gay Lancaster about performance of Helpline. And it boiled down to, as much as I could see in my first week of work at 211, was unrealistic expectations of what 211 can do, or what an INR service can do. And I worked for almost 40 years in human services in this county, and that has been true for that entire time. It's always attractive to look at 211 and say, okay, I think because they're there all the time, they can do that, and they have all this information, and they can do that, and they can do that. And I think there was some issue on their part, and certainly on my part when I was there, to failing to manage expectations of what they could actually do, and failure to say, no, I can't do that. And I don't want your money to do that because I can't do that well. And so I think going back to basics, and I know we're going to look at the whole system and, you know, having a dream model of what an INR and referral service could be, that, as I heard last month from Mr. Russell, that will take a long time to investigate and to develop, and we need this service for the next 20 years, at least the next 18 months until we have this model thing that we're going to go ahead and fund. So I'll stop there.
Chief Milliken, you had a comment?
Yeah, I just had a hard time hearing, and I want to confirm that you said that Toon has asked us to terminate the contract effective when?
Well, they talked about, within the memo, there were sort of two dates mentioned, but to not renew the contract next October 1st, but then the desire was to terminate the contract by the end of March 31st, 2022. But clearly, there was an indication they would work with us on a mutually agreeable time.
Okay, so I definitely, as good stewards of our tax dollars, every other program that we've dealt with on this board that has not met the performance measures as stated in their contract, we have terminated. We've given them a couple different chances to fix that, a couple different correction plans. Their presentation last month was about COVID, but the problem was not about COVID. This has been occurring pre-COVID, and the correction action plan happened before that. So, you know, it wasn't, the presentation to me just wasn't clear enough that that was the problem, and the problem actually precedes COVID. I am for canceling their contract because they don't meet our performance measures as stated in the contract. However, I would like to see the FSI moved forward and kept going, and you know that can be transferred to PIMS or whoever. I'd like for staff to look at that, come back with a recommendation of where that goes, how that program's going to work, how those performances are going to be measured, so that we know that we're spending dollars in the right way and we are helping children, which is our goal as JWB, is to help kids. So we need to make sure that happens. We do that with every other program that we offer here. Everything we fund, we always look at performance measures, and when that measure isn't being met, we generally set them on notice. If they still do not meet that performance measure after being on notice, we have terminated their contracts. And we've done that with several programs since I've been on this board. So that's my opinion of where we're at. I do want to see the FSI continue, but I think we can move that to another provider and make that happen and get it working the way it should work and make sure we're meeting performance measures and that we are helping kids and our community.
I think we have, hearing if anyone else have any comments or questions. If not, I think what I'm hearing, you know, on all sides is there is a need. There is a request that was voted upon by the 2-on-1 board to terminate the contract as of March 2022. I mean, that's what's in their letter, March 31, 2022. We also have, to some extent, luckily, I think we have some discussions that were had with PEMS. So I think we have to look at two separate things here. First one would be to accept, a motion to accept that we'll continue to move forward with the discussions with 2-on-1 to finalize the contract and terminate the contract and see if there's any issues that we need to deal with. The second one, I believe, is we need a motion, and if I could propose one maybe, is to a motion to grant the JWB CEO the authorization to execute a contract amendment with PEMS to assume the 2-on-1 Tampa Bay contract for Family Services Initiative of FSI, the front door services, at the same contracted rate for a period through the end of 2022.
I just had a question on that. I thought I heard Beth say that she wanted us to give her direction to explore a contract with PEMS that we would then come back in February and vote on. Is that what you said, Beth, or?
Well, that may be, I may have misspoken or spoken less clearly than I should have. The reason that I would appreciate some authority here is that if we go to PEMS and say, let's get started and let's start hiring people, they would need to know they've got a contract and money to do that. You know, I'd like to take longer time, but with respect for 2-on-1 and their hoped for termination date, we need to get moving with PIMS pretty quickly.
Okay, I don't want to rush into something that's gonna not work or be a mess, you know? Sometimes when you pull the plug on things without laying the groundwork, it causes a bigger problem, so I don't want to see that happen. So I'm comfortable giving you the authority, but I want to make sure that you're confident that it's not too much of a rush. And if you feel like we need to pull back and go back to 211 and say, we need you to extend this for another 3 months while we do an RFP or something else, that you have that option to do that.
Yeah, what I would tell you is that that's an excellent point, and we have staff who are really just now, because we just found out about this, sort of working out what the timeline would be for all the different functions that need to take place, and working with PIMS on that. March 31st is pretty darn quick. So it may well be that we go back to 211 and say, you know, would you extend that to the end of April? And I have every reason that they will be class acts about that, and they will work with us on a reasonable basis. They have chosen to terminate that contract, and I think it is up to us to move expeditiously out of respect for them and their choice. There's also a fit here with Commissioner Gerard's statement, and that is that FSI is, in particular, is a much more complex phone call than an information and referral call. And to Commissioner Gerard's point, often things have been accepted by 211 or foisted upon them, however one wants to look at it, that slow down the information and referral process, because 211's there, so let them do that. It would be our hope that taking out the FSI piece that it's a full screening. It talks, you know, it has to ask a whole lot of questions, that will in fact enable the information referral process to be smoother.
Ms. Muller?
I can just make a suggestion. If we're talking about transitioning, I understand the expeditious need to transfer, but I think it would make me feel more comfortable if we came back next month and said, this is what the proposed projection, we've talked to PIMS, this is what the job descriptions are, this is what the plan is. So it doesn't prevent PIMS from getting everything lined up and what the job descriptions are and where they're going to advertise for that, or if they're going to work with 211 to take some of those employees, or how that's going to work. But instead of just giving a blanket, yep, let's just extend the contract to the end of the year, I would feel much more comfortable. We had even PIMS here to present on how they plan to manage that and what the discussions were. It's not a long time before our next meeting, so I would just ask for that as an amendment, I guess, to Mr. McCarrick's motion, or if it's procedurally better, just make a motion that we ask that Beth negotiate with PIMS and come up with a projected plan and have them present at the next meeting.
We would absolutely come back to you at the next meeting with status and discussions of where we are.
Susan?
So my understanding is, I know the letter was dated yesterday, but there's a history with performance with PIMS. And so it's a confidence level to begin making that transition, and having them work with you, with 211 assisting in that transition for the next couple of months, that I think it elevates that confidence level to move forward to see if we can avoid the gap in services. And again, I think what we've been talking about is to give 211 the opportunity to reposition themselves without that burden of FSI. And the fact is, JWB is accountable for that specifically, and those families that are not diminishing but increasing in need. And so I guess the point, the mouth goes on, but there's a confidence level with PIMS. It's not like we're starting from new with an unknown organization. So I wholeheartedly encourage you to move forward and begin that transition as quickly as possible.
I would agree. My biggest concern is exactly what Commissioner Gerard talked about, is any gap that may happen along the way. There is a discussion, there are ongoing discussions that will discuss the termination and potential adjustments that could be made between the organizations. But during that period of time, even if another month may not sound that much, but when there's a need, and PEMS has shown the capabilities in the past to be able to meet the needs of in this space, I think it would be to our advantage to begin the process right away. We can make it, there can always be adjustments to the contracts later on and the like, but I think we need to give Beth the authority to begin that process. I personally would not start looking at hiring people unless I knew I had a contract to do it at this point in time. I wouldn't, and I'd be waiting until I had something in hand to be able to do that. That extends the period. And I'm fearful that we're missing something to the community during this period if we don't start this process right now.
If I could just have, so both have mentioned that there's a confidence in PEM's ability to do this. Have they done the FSI before? And they're currently doing it? And they have that all in place? Because I don't have any information on that component of it.
They have been, they have served as navigators in the FSI program from its inception. And so the scope of what they have done has changed back and forth. It started out with more of the functions going on at 211. Those have been moved to the navigators. But the flow of individuals into the FSI program has started with 211 and then been transferred to PEMS. So they're already sort of that second screen, as it were. So they're all very familiar with who we're serving, what the program does, what the program can do, what the program cannot do. Now, I don't want to underestimate or understate this front end function. That is certainly more and a different kind of function. PEMS has not performed that role for FSI. It does have on, I believe, a much smaller scale, some call center work related to suicide hotline and some other things. So they're not complete strangers to call centers. But I don't want to overstate that, but they have some technical ability already and some organizational understanding of that.
I think I'm mimicking Brian's concerns that we get a letter this morning and then within 2 hours, 3 hours, or an hour, 30 minutes, we're making a decision to change and extend the contract to PEMS, who has never performed this function before. So we have something in place, we're changing it very quickly within a matter of hours, and I just think 30 days isn't an unreasonable time to come up with what is their proposal and how do they plan to meet that new challenge. It's a new division of what they're currently doing, essentially. And I'm not saying that it's complicated and that they can't figure it out, but I just think I'd like to see it before we change.
I think there's a slight difference in that, is the fact that we've been requested to terminate the contract as of March 31, 2022. That was the vote of the 211 board to do that. And I think that we have to respect the fact that they've gone through this decision process and made their decision to no longer want to keep the contract.
Oh, I think so.
And so, but there's no extension to that, and there's conversations to be done and had, but, taking them by the, taking the 211 by the comments and by the specifics, what's been written in their letter, they're telling us that they want to end the contract. Well, I'm surely the staff will continue to work with them, but there is no extension unless there's some negotiation that brings it to that, and I don't think we're at that point.
To see that they're even willing to do it?
Yes, I have
So
had
there's been a
that.
previous conversation.
Yes.
Let me just add to that, because I think that's part of the confusion. I was confused. I had got the phone call from the chairman from 211. I immediately called Beth to say, hey, are you aware of this yet? And I asked that this letter, I asked to be, to be acknowledged that this was happening, and within minutes there was the letter. It just happened to be that Beth had some conversations with PEMS about other things, and she was able to bring this up. We do have experience with him. PEMS has done some good work, and in other areas, and with similarities and support. We need not to, and anything can be changed, but we need not to take too much time. I'm not saying February isn't enough, but take too much time in trying to invent or reinvent something that's capabilities are there and need to be extended, but they also need to be staffed. And that's where my concern comes in, is the period of time in which it needs to be staffed could take longer, and we can begin the contract immediately, but it may not take effect until April or May, depending on what resources are available. If there's any discussions about transfers of resources or any of those things, all of that has to happen. And that's why I'm more open to say, let's move forward right now and work through that process.
I have a couple comments. As I understand it now, with the PIMS is really our only option. Is that right? Right now, as we look at it?
Well, we had probably, I would say, 3 options that would have risen to the top as possibilities. And because 211 has been on a cap for a period of time, staff obviously do scenario planning and,
Right.
what if this and what if that. So yesterday was not the first day we thought about this. One would be to do a full open procurement that might include for-profit call centers, out of community call centers.
But our quickest response is going to be using PIMS. Am I right about that? Okay.
Absolutely.
So
And there are 2 agencies that do navigation for us. PIMS is much stronger in terms of its ability and willingness to take this on.
And then our plans, if I understand correctly, are to basically have them step in for the same funding and finish the contract that we had with 211. Is that right? So we have a ceiling on the amount of money that's being
Yes.
discussed, that will be utilized, that would be commensurate with the previous vendor.
That would be the ceiling. We would build the budget from 0 up. So it's not to say that money just flies over there, but yes.
Right. I mean, I'm just saying we have some parameters.
From the board
Because
perspective, yes.
us going to them, they know, I'm sure, that if they're the only ones being considered, they pretty much can run it like they want to run it, as far as the contract negotiation go, because we're in a problem spot here. But we have to get new call routing procedures, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So that's got to get that word out, and that's going to happen pretty quick to be able to make that be a smooth flow of services. But I think we should also pay attention to one thing that people from the 211 did say about the FSI issues, was that the qualifications of the majority of the people that called in, they went through this long questioning process, evaluation, and then said, sorry, pal, you don't qualify. See you later. And I think we're going to encounter that problem when we go to PIMS or wherever in the world we go later on. So I think we need to reevaluate how the screening process takes place. So if they are not going to be eligible to be qualified, that can be determined very quickly, so that the person in the call center doesn't spend 25 minutes or however long it takes to evaluate this and then just say, yeah, thanks for all the information, but we aren't going to do anything for you.
Yeah, and I would just say that the bullet points of ineligibility that were in that letter were not all accurate, but that we are always looking at what that eligibility ought to be. And one of the things that has been most different in this last year and a half have been the availability of federal funds for some of the large ticket items that FSI often provided. But it has always been a program that served families that were likely to be sustainable. So, some of the items in there are absolutely accurate and comport with the way this program was built. It It is not a permanent support voucher for families who are homeless, for instance. That's just not the nature of this program.
Well, all I'm suggesting, Beth, is that they seem to suggest it was a problem, and it was a problem enough that they don't want to have to fool with it in the future because they feel like they can't meet our obligations, given the circumstances. So I think that's going to be a potential issue on the horizon, and we might want to, within the JWB framework, address perhaps how that can be mitigated to a certain extent to make it a more viable option to deal with the call center with these calls in a quicker response. That's just my
And I agree, and I think internally, we're looking at this as an opportunity to look at the program beginning to end. I mean, anytime you have a disruption, you ought to use that as an opportunity to be better. And so whether it's criteria for inclusion in FSI or anything else about the process, we will keep an open mind.
How do we handle this open discussion?
Well, since it appears that you are going to take action, we do need to accept public comment before you take action on this. So if we have anybody who would wish to speak on it, they can fill out a card or jump up, fill out their card later.
Okay. I just want to make sure we're following
Yes.
policy. Yes. Well, excuse me, just before you do, though, just want to make sure, I had proposed a motion. Do we have that? Is that still a motion or not?
You can't make a motion, so.
As the chair, right?
No, I
suggested a
proposed it, that's why I'm asking. Do we
Right.
have a motion?
I don't think anyone made the motion.
Nobody made your motion nor
Okay.
seconded it yet, so right now there is no motion on the floor, but since the discussion has indicated action, legally, we do need to allow
Okay.
for public comment.
Great, that's just wanted to make sure.
And just to clarify, I believe our chair has suggested 2 motions when that time comes.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Stephen Hoshek had an appointment this morning that he could not change, so some of our board members are here, and I'm here as the past chair. And I think all this discussion has been very fair, and questions raised are ones that we're concerned about, too. Our concern, greatest concern, is that children are being served with families, and that's what FSI is all about, and we want it to be the best program ever. I would certainly echo Commissioner Gerard's comments about the INR, kind of decoupling that from the FSI. I would also suggest, Chief, that this is not just about COVID. That was just happened to be the 2 most recent years that we're dealing with. But, we could go back to earlier years with some of the same implications that have taken place now. I personally want to say that this is not the grand divorce. This is a separation for now. I believe we'll be working together, 211 will be working together, and we want to work together. And we'll do everything we can to cooperate to be sure that there's a smooth transition so that families with children are able to get services as quickly as possible. So whatever you need, we're there for you. But we do hope that you will decouple the FSI and the information and referral. Do you have any questions? Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you for your message. Okay, so any other comments or questions, or do I have a motion? I've actually did propose 2. One is to accept the request by 211 to begin the process of termination. The second was to give Beth the authority to execute a contract amendment with PEMS to assume the 211 Tampa Bay contract for family services, FSI, the front door services, at the same contracted rate for a period through the end of FY 2022. That's my proposal. I put it out to the board.
Legally, we don't need to accept their termination notice. Under their contract, they have the right to give the termination notice, so you really just need one motion.
Okay.
Okay, so
Then it
I'll
was the
make that
second one.
single motion for legal, so that we, obviously the contract will be terminated because we don't accept that, but to move forward and giving Beth the power to negotiate with PIMS and come up with a program that will work, along with performance measures, exactly what you mentioned, and that performance measures are based in there, so you'll see how that's performing.
And just for clarification, it's also to contract with PEMS, not just negotiate.
Yeah, and the contract would, correct. Actually, what he read was good. I just want to add performance measures in there to that as well.
But for the duration of the time.
Through FY 2022.
Under the same financial and everything else? Yes. Okay, I'd second the motion.
And again, just to clarify, I have no problem with terminating the FSI services at all, their FSI contract, I should say. But I do think we need to, as Commissioner Parks said, decouple the 211 INR service from FSI. And it seems, I haven't looked at their contract, but it appears that the objectives over the years have morphed into just FSI. When they have provided this INR service in this county for, I realized in my head it's at least 40 years, probably more than that. And we still need that service. So I'm hoping that we'll keep an eye on them, and, you know, if they need the kind of assistance that we gave them years and years ago to continue this service, it's very important to this community. So I would hope that we will do that and not just say, oh, well, somebody else can do that, because they can't.
And please correct me if I'm wrong, but we're not the only provider of funds to 211, am I correct?
Correct. The other most significant would be the county. And we may be talking about different services over a 40-year period, Commissioner Gerard, but our records show that we have been a funder of 211 for about 9 years, and that before that it was largely county dollars, but.
No, you were a funder
way back
30 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know what it was under, but you were a funder. I know, because
And I don't know if it came and went and then came back then, but in any case.
It may have, but
mostly we need to be dealing with.
But they do an awful lot of referrals
Today.
to families with children. So.
And I think with this discussion about the transition, there's a great opportunity for all parties to come together and really look at this and say, what are we really doing? What do we really need to do? What can FSI or what could 211 do best? And how do we best service this community across the board? Yes, ma'am.
One more comment?
Yes.
We still have the group that meets, I know I'm on it, of funders that meets, what do we call that? I think the last time we met was probably when we decided to fund the school nurses.
I think you're talking about the HHSLB?
Yes, I am.
Okay, good.
Yes. And I think that would be a good forum to talk about this.
Okay, and that group, that has representatives from, looking at Dr. Carr, she's represented the school system and chairs that currently.
Okay.
And has representatives from the county, from the school system, and from JWB.
And I think that's a good place to talk about it.
Okay. We're looking at an upcoming with those folks. It's really hard to get to get a date on everybody's calendar, but we are just beginning to look at one for later this spring, and that sounds like a great idea.
And with PEMS, and especially with the community to make sure that we're meeting their needs. With that, let's move on to the Chief Executive Officer's report.
We have some good upcoming things to remind you of. JWB's 75th anniversary legislative acknowledgement during Children's Week. Please pencil in your calendars, if you can, for our upcoming trip to the state's capital, likely February 2nd and 3rd, which is aligned with Children's Week in Tallahassee, and with the support of Chairman Latvala, who chairs Education and Workforce, and his staff. We have been working on a House tribute to recognize JWB's 75 years of innovation and service for the children of Pinellas County. And so if all of that works out, the planned activities would include the tribute itself, which would be an appearance before the chairman's committee, a modest reception, we're thinking, cookies and milk maybe, in the Capitol, no alcohol for those for whom that matters, a modest reception in the Capitol for our Pinellas legislative delegation, and a possible expanded or separate reception for some of that subcommittee, the subcommittee chairs. In 1945, our Pinellas delegation was and remains today committed to the health and well-being of our county's children. So we will share final details on that as they become available. As you are all aware, Circuit 6 has had a change in its lead agency in our community-based care for children removed and then in foster care. I've met with the leadership from Family Support Services, the new Circuit 6 community-based care lead agency. On December 21st, in our offices, CEO Jen Petian and her Chief of Staff, Carlos Cruz. There is no doubt this already has and will continue to be a very heavy lift for this organization, who are coming into a troubled situation and are more than doubling their size by doing this. I also attended a Circuit 6 roundtable meeting last week hosted by the DCF Secretary Javon Harris and Florida House Speaker Chris Sprouse. The speaker and the time was aimed at continuing discussions to build a strong, inclusive child welfare community-based care system in Pinellas and Pasco counties. I also chair the monthly Pinellas Community Alliance meetings that had been more like every 2 months or 3 months. Given this change, we will meet monthly. And that alliance is included in statute, and there is stated accountability from the lead agency to that alliance, but I would have to tell you there really aren't a lot of teeth in that. The contract is with DCF. Nevertheless, the way this is supposed to work, the community is engaged in and holds accountable the lead agency. As you're well aware, JWB's commitment and role within local child welfare continuum has been and will continue to be on the prevention side. And while it's still very early, I can share that the Sheriff's Office seems to be optimistic about the lead agency's ability to work with front-end services that could safely keep children in their homes and families intact with intensive services. So that's one of those opportunities for improvement for the entire continuum, and we're seeing at least some of the right things being said, which is encouraging. Next month, we will bring to this board a request to release a competitive solicitation to address unmet needs in Pinellas County children and families, to increase efficiencies and promote inclusion by inviting the submission of letters of intent, or LOIs, from respondents who wish to provide new programming that is aligned with JWB's fiscal year 21 through 25 strategic plan. We broke out our externally facing strategic initiatives into 2 buckets, if you will, and the first 3 that will be part of this LOI process are early childhood development, prevention of child abuse and neglect, and strengthening community. And then some months out, we will replicate that process for early childhood or for school readiness and school success. And it was important to align those with a time when the programs could be up and running for not this next school year, but the following school year, which is August, not October, so. So we understand there are gaps in services, and while we annually look at our existing contracts and when or how they should be increased, we wanted to be able to hear from the community of providers if there are other interventions that they believe would be effective in each one of these three. And so this is not to add funding to existing programs. We will have discussions with our providers about that in the spring as we approach our budget. This is looking at new or different interventions. And we don't know what we'll see yet, but we look forward to having that open door to either current agencies or agencies we don't fund who may have good suggestions for us. The solicitation is intended to bring efficiencies in two main ways. First, by increasing the breadth of services for children and families to most efficiently and effectively meet their needs and to meet our strategic goals. And then second, by the way in which we're procuring the system, the projects themselves, by having this much more limited letter of intent process first, so that we can look through those first and determine which look promising with our understanding of the literature and everything else, and then sort of green light those to come back with a fuller proposal. So it saves time for agencies and it saves time for our staff in looking through full proposals where perhaps the concept was not one that we were likely to fund. So a few other save the date reminders, and you'll get emails about these, but the 2022 JWB Children's Summit, we would love for that to be in person, but it's in January and that doesn't look like that's going to happen. So, or February rather. So February 18th, a Friday, the event will be virtual. Its theme is Restoring Hope. The summit will feature a pretty robust panel-style presentation titled Growing Hope, Protecting Youth Mental Health, to include a state of youth mental health, lived experiences, efforts underway that are working, and a call to action regarding advocacy and legislative priorities. And you'll also see our now world-famous annual report video that's always really inspiring. So more details will follow. You will get a registration link. Make sure you register. And then our 75th anniversary awards luncheon will be Friday, April 29th. It is our hope that that can be in person. We have reserved the Coliseum, which is a physically large venue, which we hope will help that. Board members will be invited to serve once again on the honorary host committee. We will also, of course, be inviting past board members. The event's being planned to honor 2021 Kids First Cooperman Bogue Award winners, H. Browning Spence Education Award recipients, as well as the inaugural Dillinger McCabe Leadership Awardee. So formal invitations for that event will be forthcoming. And that's all I have.
Any comments, questions? Okay, currently you have the information items in front of you. If you have any comments or questions on the information items. Seeing none, do we have any other open agenda requests? Before I adjourn, we do have one anniversary.
Yes, we do.
Okay.
I'll do
right.
that. Lilia Pletnev has been with the Juvenile Welfare Board for 16 years. So that is our December anniversary. And I know we have a number in January that we'll bring back to you next month.
Thank you. Seeing no more business, do I have a motion to adjourn? So moved. We're adjourned.